Berserk is a 25-episode dark fantasy set within a fictional medieval universe during a 100-year civil war between the Kingdom of Midland and the Empire of Tudor. Aside from focusing on a single clear objective as shared by the group, Berserk focuses on a handful of individuals' lives and dreams. The story begins with an in medias res introduction where our protagonist Guts hunts down demons with a thirst for revenge against his former friend. Subsequently, we're taken back to discover how this forlorn existence develops.
Tell him the Black Swordsman has come.
What? The Black Swordsman?
That's it.
Guts is a character who appears to be your typical meathead, often found on the battlefield, swinging a sword the length of his body, cleaving countless enemies asunder. Guts is a victim of a life he never asked for, as he was tossed into battle at an early age. Because of his past events, he is a very scarred man, both physically and emotionally. Although he can serve as a one-man army, he is not a flawless character. In fact, the majority of the most important characters found in this show are experts on the battlefield, yet they have very significant internal struggles. Guts personally struggles when it comes to human interaction and has major trust issues. His largest personal goal is simply to discover the meaning of life as well as find purpose, and I know that usually having a character without a solid goal that he's working towards is a bad thing, but this actually works when considering Guts' upbringing. Griffith, leader of the Hawks, is characterized by his boundless ambition and is highly educated. He's a very poetic speaker who knows how to capture the hearts and minds of those around him. Griffith is purposely an enigmatic character, so I can't say much about him because we all know that he becomes the eventual antagonist as the story's introduction so blatantly foreshadowed. Casca is a woman who covets your balls, not because you have them, but because she doesn't. Life can be hard for a woman on the battlefield. Hell, life in general can be hard for women, especially when considering the times. Her struggles mostly consist of being born with a vagina and wanting senpai to notice her. I think Casca would have been a much better character if she wasn't shoehorned into the typical women cliches such as having arbitrary mood swings. Her ever-changing emotions made her a difficult character to cope with, both for the viewer and for the other characters in the story.
It's because of you!
The remainder of the side characters and antagonists consist of allies within the Band of the Hawk as well as enemies within the rival Empire of Tudor as well as the aristocracy within the Kingdom of Midland, who are mostly jealous because of Griffith's prowess. Aside from Guts, Griffith, and Casca, the remainder of the Hawks consist of foil characters, sadly, and they're fairly well detailed when you consider what they are, but they still pale in comparison when you're talking about the three lead characters. Our antagonists from both Midland and Tudor all have reasonable goals. As we see, the aristocrats within the Kingdom of Midland feel that their nobility is being threatened by Griffith's success. And for the opposing Empire of Tudor, they're at war, so that's kind of what you do, you try and kill each other. Berserk begins by introducing Guts as an acting protagonist, foreshadowing future events as well as establishing its genre. Now, it's pretty important that we're introduced to Berserk as being a dark fantasy because by episode 1, we know that there are supernatural elements at work here. We see that there are demons. If it wasn't for this, then Berserk would feel as if it was very loosely inspired by history, and by the time we finally see our very first demon halfway through, it would really take us out of the moment. Because Berserk is set within a country that has been at war for 100 years, you might expect the war itself to be the focal point of the story, when in fact, these battles only serve as an indirect influence to the plot. The real goal is about the individual characters, giving them personality, developing their characters, having them realize their dreams or goals, and setting out to accomplish them. The Hawks are so skilled that they're practically unmatched on the battlefield, but the story does a pretty good job of creating the appearance of threat and battle, where it puts characters in situations which will test them and push their limits. However, you would expect with this massive war against the Empire of Tudor that greatly outnumbers them that the Hawks would take losses, and they do, but it's always these indiscriminate troops, it's always these nameless faces out there that die. It's never any of the characters that have had formal introductions or any of them that have had names, honestly, and this is only relating to the battle against Tudor, where you would expect to have these major losses. Despite featuring very few battle-related consequences, the action sequences work very well, as Berserk offers a variety of different combat here. We have army versus army, we have one man versus another in a duel, we have one man versus many people, and even assassinations. It is hard not to get excited when you see a man who's desperate, he's wounded, he's on his feet, and you have his enemies which are on horseback, clad in armor, chasing after him, and he takes them down, swinging his massive sword, cleaving them in half, horse and all. Aside from creating an adrenaline-pumping visual spectacle with these battles, they often serve to slightly progress the characters. When the Hawks are victorious, Griffith is praised and promoted, Guts becomes closer to his peers, as well as doing some soul-searching mid-battle, because for some reason, that's when he can quiet out all of his thoughts and just almost relax, kind of. That's a zen moment where he's just piling up bodies like that. And then we have Casca, who just continues to complain. There is one scene I wanted to bring your attention to here, that is when Guts pushes his limits too far and is left within an inch of his life. His injuries are so severe that he can't even travel with the Hawks where they're going to their next significant battle the day after, so he's given the majestic gift of plot hole in a bag in the form of generic magic medicine. They rub it on and all of his injuries go away, no matter what it was, being shot through the hand with an arrow, being stabbed, you name it. This stuff will cure it within seconds practically.
Please stop shaking me.
All right, let's have a drink. Here, here.
That's not a good idea to do in a story. On a side note, never ask a man who only wields a 7-foot-long sword to perform an indoor assassination. Just doesn't work that well, and I found that to be very funny when they had Guts do this assassination, especially when there was another character within the Hawks who excelled at talents that would have made him more suitable for assassinations. But Guts goes in there and stabs this guy so deep that it left a 12-inch wide exit wound on a stab. Now, you stab somebody with a knife or throw a knife at them, nobody's gonna know who did that because everybody has knives. But with Guts, that massive sword, it's a dead giveaway, I'm just saying. As for the pacing, Berserk intermittently switched from intense action and back to our daily lives of our Hawks here, and it worked very well. It felt very rewarding as we got to see the gradual progression that the battles offer. So I'm not going to give any spoilers here, but I need to talk about this ending, and chances are many of you already know that Berserk is infamous for having this cliffhanger ending, and in fact, I think out of all of the other anime that I've seen, this has to be the largest cliffhanger ending that I've ever seen in anime, and this could be received as one or two different ways here. That could be, you could see it as either A, being a fuck you, go read the manga ending, or B, it could be one of these endings where you have to make it up for yourself, which both are really inexcusable, honestly, and if we wanted to make up bits of the story, we would just write our own. However, to its defense, it was foreshadowed fairly well, as we see the first episode, which had very strong foreshadowing. Honestly, I would have toned that down a bit, but we know that they're going to be enemies eventually. We didn't know why, and we also had some foreshadowing later on, such as with some of the things that Zod said, as well as other things relating to Griffith's past, as well as his Balet, the mysterious amulet that he wears. So Berserk as an anime it stands on its own fairly well, but if you enjoy the show, then you're going to want closure. You're going to need that ending, and in those regards, you will be disappointed, and you're probably going to want to check out the manga. But here's where the problem begins, is that you can't just pick up the manga where the anime left off, because the anime leaves out a lot. It leaves out characters, it leaves out significant bits of characters' backstories, as well as certain parts of their development, so you are missing out on a lot if you try and pick up where the anime left off, because they do things a little bit differently here. So it leaves you in a position where you're starting off from the beginning and having to read or experience the same story twice. For me, I didn't really mind it because I actually like the anime and I also like the manga as well, but it may be an issue if you're sitting here having to go through the same story. So if you're one of these people that prefer to read manga over watching anime, that may make the anime itself obsolete. Now, don't get me wrong here, I'm not actually deducting any points because it's not exactly like the manga, but these are some problems that you will face when you get into Berserk. The anime of Berserk was created in 1997 by Studio OLM, which you probably haven't heard of before, but they did make another anime you may have seen. Pokemon, which is pretty crazy to think about this, but Pokemon and Berserk were actually created by the same production studio within a few months of each other. The reason why I brought this up was because A, it's really interesting, and B, now you have a baseline of understanding what this company is capable of, even though Pokemon probably had a larger budget than Berserk did. But Berserk received such negative feedback from some people. There are some reviews that even reached as far as saying that Berserk is just a slideshow when it is far from the truth. However, I will admit that they did cut corners. There were some battles where they would be interrupted with a hand-painted single cell, which actually looked very beautiful, but still it was an interrupt from the action nonetheless, as well as the majority of the corners that they cut existed within the dialogue scenes where they only animated what they really needed to, which was just the mouths. This is actually a common practice in anime. You can find anime of today that take these same shortcuts, so it's not something that Berserk skipped out on. Of course, if these problems were fixed, then the presentation would have been greatly improved, but it doesn't mean that the animation is bad. It just means that it's average during the dialogue scenes. And we also had the speed lines, which are actually a bit outdated for late 90s. That's something I would expect from 80s anime, not so much late 90s. As for the art style itself, I felt they did a great job of drawing the characters as well as creating this medieval atmosphere that we're in. I really liked the castle settings, even though there were some outdoor settings that felt a bit drab to me. And we also have some of the demons, which were drawn very well. Moving on to the audio, excuse the favoritism for a moment, but Berserk is my #1 favorite anime soundtrack. I really love it. Susumu Hirasawa composed a beautiful score, not just for Berserk, where I loved every single song that we had, but also for many of his other works. More noteworthy works would be some of the anime directed by Satoshi Kon, which I think most of his anime was actually had music composed by Susumu Hirasawa as well. So moving on to the voice acting, I'm probably going to get shot with an arrow right now, and you know how this is going to turn out, but I like to watch the dub of Berserk. That doesn't mean that it's perfect or great or anything. That just means that I like the voice actors that we had for the most significant characters, and I felt they did a good job of portraying the character's personality. However, with my most recent rewatch, which was a few days ago, I switched back and forth between the original language audio here with the Japanese, and they did an amazing job. I felt that all of the characters were consistently cast, and it was a nice quality all the way through. So no matter what you like, sub or dub, you are free to watch either one because I feel that they're both a good experience. Moving on to my final score, I give Berserk a performance level of a 7.9 out of 10 with an enjoyment level of a 9. Feel free to round that up to an 8 if you like. Berserk is an anime that I really enjoyed watching, and it's something that I think you will like as well. But if you're a person who's more into manga than anime, then you would probably want to just bypass the anime, go straight to the manga, Be sure to listen to that Berserk soundtrack while you read it. It really completes the experience. I'd like to give a special thanks to Brady, the undefeated magician, for requesting this review on Patreon. If you'd like to support this channel further, or possibly request a discussion or review, head on over to my Patreon page. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to subscribe if you haven't yet. Also, like, comment, and share it with your friends. Thanks for watching. Be sure to tune in next time when I review Violence Jack.